What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch back here with another NFL video, and in this video, I'm going to give you my Super Bowl bubble breakdown. I'm going to break down the 8 to 10 teams that I believe will be in the chase for the Super Bowl this season in the NFL. In the NFL in 2020, which teams do I honestly believe can win the Super Bowl? Because yes, there are 32 teams in the NFL, but there are only every single season 8 to maybe, if we're lucky, 10 to 12 teams in the entire league that are legit competing for a Super Bowl championship. The rest, they're just in the league so that we can schedule the games. There's only about 8 to 10 legit contenders in the NFL, and I'm going to break down each team, tell you which ones I have at the top of the contender list, which teams I feel are in the bubble, but they're just slightly in the bubble, and the teams, maybe a couple teams that I feel are just outside the bubble or just hanging on to that bubble, the Super Bowl bubble for the 2020 season. Colin Cowherd gave you his Super Bowl bubble for the 2020 season. This is where I got the idea, and I want to respond with my Super Bowl bubble. Before I give you my Super Bowl bubble for the 2020 season, make sure that you do spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this, and comment below your opinion. Let me know in the comment section below who is in your Super Bowl bubble. Keep in mind, it's only about 8 to 10 teams. Now, some teams can be just outside the bubble, some teams can be in the heart of the bubble, and some teams are around the bubble. Let me know which teams you feel the strongest about in 2020. So let's take a look at my Super Bowl bubble for the 2020 season, and these teams are put in random order, but these are the teams that I feel are closest or in my Super Bowl bubble, the Super Bowl contenders, the teams I feel best about in 2020 for the chance at a championship. So let's start it off with the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. What is their chances of repeating this year? I have them in the heart of the bubble. They're going to be a very good team in 2020. I think the Chiefs, I don't know if they're going to be the Super Bowl champs this year. I don't know if they're going to repeat. But when we're trying to project forward to January, they will be one of the few teams that has a legit opportunity. And there's a few reasons for this. Of course, they have the best quarterback in football, in my opinion, in Patrick Mahomes, the biggest game changer at the most important position. That is crucial. Andy Reid is one of the best coaches in the league consistently, not just 1 year or 2 years, but consistently, and also one of the best offensive minds. They have a group of weapons. I think their defense is lacking some players in the secondary outside of Tyrann Mathieu. They have pass rushers, though, so they can get by. I'd like to see them take strides defensively for them to up their chances, because you never know when their offense isn't going to continue to put up these points and these amount of just dominant performances. And the Chiefs did get a little fortunate with their comebacks in the playoffs, but I definitely think when we're projecting forward, they will be one of the few teams that we're thinking about come late January. So the Chiefs are in the heart of the bubble. And then you look at the Baltimore Ravens. They were the number 1 seed in the AFC a year ago, and I believe they'll be maybe the number 1 seed again in the AFC, maybe the number 1 seed in the NFL, but certainly in the conversation for one of the teams. And as you can see, they're right on the heels of the Chiefs. I think the Ravens probably, if I had to say right now who has a better opportunity to win the Super Bowl, I think a lot of people would lean to Kansas City because of the Mahomes factor. But when you're looking at a complete team, I think the Ravens and what they've done this offseason has put them maybe right slightly above the Chiefs to say, hey, I think this team actually could overcome and defeat the Chiefs come playoff time. Although the Chiefs have dominated that rivalry recently, I do feel the Ravens, with their great secondary, their great coaching, Lamar Jackson, the run game they have. Yes, they lost Marshall Yonda, but I think adding Calais Campbell, adding Derek Wolfe, those were huge pieces to allow them to keep winning and they're in the Super Bowl bubble for sure, no doubt about it. San Francisco 49ers are the team in the NFC that I would say they're probably the most collectively talented team maybe in the NFL. When you look at the entire roster talent of each team in the league, down the list, every position, I think the 49ers would rank the highest at every position in the league. Now, I don't think it's overwhelming, but I definitely think the combination between the pure talent of San Francisco and the coaching with Kyle Shanahan has me saying that it's going to be difficult for the 49ers to not be a good team this year. Could they take a Super Bowl slump season? Potentially. Would that likely fall on Jimmy Garoppolo? Yes. I think this season for the 49ers depends on how Garoppolo develops. Does he continue to progress, or does he take a step back? That will ultimately dictate how much of a threat the 49ers are to lose a Super Bowl and then come back and win it the following season. The next team, random order again, is the New Orleans Saints. Now, the Saints are just not at the heart of the bubble, but they're like firmly inside the Super Bowl bubble, and they're firmly one of the NFC contenders. And you could certainly argue that they're just as good or have just high of an opportunity to win the Super Bowl this year as the 49ers. You could certainly argue that. Now, I will say the 49ers were the better team last year, as evident by going to the Super Bowl, but also by evidence by beating them during the regular season in their building. Now, I will say this about the Saints. It's hard not to get tricked and trapped into the Saints, because the Saints have consistently over the last 3 to 4 years been in the conversation for a lot of people as the team that they feel will win the Super Bowl or will at least go to the Super Bowl in the NFC, whether you had New England or Kansas City or one of these teams winning it in the AFC. But the Saints always come up in the NFC over the past 3 to 4 seasons of going to the Super Bowl. I fell into the trap in 2018. They disappointed me by losing in the NFC Championship game. Last year, I thought they would regress, but I still thought they would be a good team. But a lot of people outside of me had them being a really quality team and going deep in the playoffs. So the thing with the Saints is they just continue to disappoint in the playoffs. They just need to be better in the playoffs. And when you look at their roster is probably just as good as the team in 2018 that went to the NFC Championship. So they should have high expectations, and they certainly have the coaching and the quarterback play to be in this conversation. There's no doubt about it. Now, the other team that will be the most intriguing this year and the one that will be competing with the Saints in the NFC South is the Tampa Bay Bucks. Now, watch where I place them. I place them almost identical to the Saints. Now, it's hard to tell here on how I built the bubble, but I do have them actually slightly more to the inside, the heart of the bubble, than I do the Saints. Because I know that the Saints are more of a for sure thing. But when I'm thinking about at the end of the day, the ceiling of every team, I feel like the ceiling, the absolute ceiling of the Bucks is higher than the absolute ceiling of the Saints. If Tom Brady goes back into a time machine and is amazing, if Rob Gronkowski comes back healthy and is incredible, and if this team grows defensively as a young unit and gets even better. Their coaching is on par, if not better, than New Orleans all around, from the offensive coordinator to defensive coordinator to the collective position coaches they have. It's very underrated. And I think the Bucks, yes, we don't know what they are. It's a huge question, but their ceiling is huge. And that's a huge thing when considering the Super Bowl bubble and teams that can legitimately win the Super Bowl. Now, the next couple of teams are teams that I feel are like in the Super Bowl bubble, but they're like on the edge of the Super Bowl bubble. They're both AFC teams. The first one is the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers are a team that I think they certainly could be considered in the Super Bowl bubble, but I would also not hate on you if they were not in the bubble at all, because the Steelers have a really talented roster, especially defensively. I think they'll have one of the top 5 defenses in the league between their pass rush and the improvement in the secondary last year. I think it's pretty certain that they'll have a really talented defense, especially if TJ Watt continues to be the terror off the edge that he was last year. Now, the thing with the Steelers that's promising and interesting and compelling is Ben Roethlisberger coming back to help this team. Ben Roethlisberger is a Hall of Fame quarterback. He is a quarterback that's won multiple Super Bowls. He's been there. He's done that. Mike Tomlin is a Super Bowl coach. Yes, they don't have the electrifying weapons of the Steelers teams of the past, but I think that's why people are underrating them. People look at the AB teams with Le'Veon Bell and they say, those teams were amazing and everyone always had them going to the Super Bowl and going far, but they never had the defense this team had. And I would argue they didn't have the chemistry this team had, and they weren't as tight-knit as this team. What I saw from the Steelers in 2019 and the 2019 season was a team that not necessarily was as talented as those teams, but played a lot harder and was a lot more consistent. And that means much more than just pure talent in the NFL. I like the Steelers, and I actually think you're sleeping on their talent offensively. So I'm going to say that they are a team that's slightly in the bubble, but they're on the line. So the Steelers, I wouldn't be shocked if they won the Super Bowl. That's why they're in the Super Bowl bubble. The Buffalo Bills are the next team, and they're another team in the AFC that I would say, just like the Steelers, they're maybe a little bit more in the bubble than the Steelers by the picture, by the technicality here. But the Bills, I think, probably have a lower floor than the Steelers, but probably a higher ceiling. And the reason being is because I think their ceiling offensively is higher than the Steelers, but their defense, I think, is probably higher floor. I think because McDermott is such a great defensive coach, I would find it very troubling or almost nearly impossible if the Bills were not a top 10 defense next year. That's how good I feel about the coaching and the talent on defense in Buffalo. Now, do I think they have as high of a ceiling on defense as the Steelers? Probably not, but I think they have a higher floor. Then when you look at the offense and compare it to the Steelers, I think because Josh Allen is such a young player, but he's so physically raw, makes me say that I think if Josh Allen takes a massive step this year, this team is the sleeping giant of the league. No doubt the AFC. Because if Josh Allen for some reason becomes an MVP candidate, then you're talking about the Bills not only having a great defense, but then a really good quarterback, a really good coach, and really good supporting cast around that quarterback. And then they instantly become not just a threat for the AFC East or AFC, but a threat for the Chiefs, a threat for the Niners, a threat for the teams at the top of the list as the best team in the league. But it all falls on the Josh Allen jump, and I think Stephon Diggs will have something to say about that. The Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks, I have firmly, just a little bit, they're around the edge, but they're inside the bubble. And the biggest reason here is because they don't have the questions like the Steelers and the Bills do at the quarterback position. Russell Wilson is one of the two best quarterbacks in the NFL, and that is for certain. Now, with the Seahawks, I would say that they don't have the roster the Steelers or the Bills do, but because they have been so consistent over the years with Wilson and Carroll, they are firmly in the bubble. If they're able to get some better play out of some defensive linemen, their defense specifically, if DK grows, if their running game can get healthy, this team certainly can contend with teams like the Saints, Bucks, and Niners in the NFC. I just think right now, because they've lost Clowney, it doesn't appear he's coming back, I have them slightly back from those other teams in the NFC. The Philadelphia Eagles are a team that I have just outside the Super Bowl bubble. Now, it's the first team I have outside the bubble, but as you can see, the beak of the eagle there is just a little bit touching that bubble. So the reason I have the Eagles outside of the bubble for the most part is because I feel like the Eagles offensively are a complete question mark. And I just don't know what to expect from the receiving core. I don't think their running game is ultra explosive, although Miles Sanders could take a step forward. Their offensive line's good. Their defensive line's really good. We need to see the secondary come together. So the Eagles are more of a team that I like their coaching. I like their quarterback. But I just don't know about the rest of the team in terms of what production are we going to get out of them. And I feel like we have been overrating the Eagles the last couple seasons, specifically me. I need to self-scout myself, and I need to say, the Eagles, I thought they would be a Super Bowl contender. They haven't been that the last couple years. I need to take a step back, reevaluate it. I like what they've done this offseason, but I just have some questions that I don't have about some of these other teams in that bubble. So they're there, but I'm not willing to put them inside just yet. And then you look at the other team in the NFC East is the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are in the bubble, and I think they're very close to teams like the Saints and the Bucs in the NFC. I think the Cowboys are one of the most talented rosters in football. I think the fact that their coaching is going to take a massive step forward, not only with McCarthy being the new head coach, comparing him to a Jason Garrett, but also a Nolan coming in for their DC is going to do huge things for their defense. And yes, they're worse in the secondary from a talent perspective. I would say at corner, but I think their corners there are actually underrated and you're not giving them enough credit outside of Byron Jones leaving. They did add Clinton Dix, who's a massive upgrade at the safety spot. I think they've gotten better on the defensive line, even though Robert Quinn left. I think they have more depth there. Now, offensively, I think they're much more explosive, and that at the end of the day is the end of the story when it comes to teams in the league right now. The Chiefs don't need to be amazing defensively because they can just score more points than you, and they're more explosive than you, and they have more playmakers than you. I think for the Cowboys, that's the beginning and the end of the conversation. If they can score more points than you, you will not be able to beat them. That's the way you play football in today's NFL, and that's why I have the Cowboys firmly inside the Super Bowl bubble. But I would not say they're at the top of the NFC list, but I do certainly think that they could be by the end of the year. There is no debate. And the last team I want to bring up that is not in the Super Bowl bubble, they're the furthest away from the heart of the bubble, but they are a team that if everything goes right, yes, I do think they could miraculously pull off a Super Bowl victory. And this one may be funny to some people. The Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns are one of the most talented rosters, go up and down the list in the NFL. Yes, they have new coaching, but if Baker Mayfield takes strides forward, just like Josh Allen, they should be competing in the AFC. If the Browns play the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, I don't think you should be surprised because they are just as talented as the Chiefs. It's not a huge gap there. It's really the difference between Mahomes and Mayfield right now. And what they've done this offseason, I think, has closed the gap on the rest of the AFC competitors, specifically the Ravens in their own division. So, yes, the Browns are not in the bubble. They're the furthest from the bubble in my conversation here. But I do think they're a team that you need to note and think about. And they're the one team that I think is not being talked about really enough in the playoff race that I think deserves to be there because of their talent and because I think they have immense potential. And that's what you're talking about here with the bubble. There's other teams that came to mind. First, the Patriots, right? If Stidham is a good player, then they are probably somewhere around the edge of the bubble, like the Steelers, because their defense is good, their offensive line is good, they have Bill Belichick, and that's enough to be in the playoff race. But I don't think they're a Super Bowl team this year, but they could be a playoff team this year. The Broncos, I just think they're too young. I like a lot of their pieces, but I think they're too young for me to say they're a Super Bowl team. The Raiders are another team that I just think they are missing one or two pieces, a lot like the Broncos, still very young, and I think they're maybe a year away. I would say the same thing about the Cardinals, although I almost considered the Cardinals to be the Browns of this conversation here, where they're on the furthest in the NFC side, but if Kyler becomes an MVP candidate, they could be in the Super Bowl conversation, and if their defense takes a step forward, I just think that's going to be 1 year away for them. And the other teams, I'm trying to think through the list. Packers, Vikings, I feel high floor teams, but not very high ceilings. I think the Vikings and the Packers could both make the playoffs, but I don't see them winning the Super Bowl. And AFC, the rest of the list, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, the Titans are a team just like the Vikings. I think they could make the playoffs, but not win the Super Bowl. That is my Super Bowl bubble for 2020. Let me know yours in the comment section below. It's Mitch of the Bottom Line View. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, Gronk spike the like button and subscribe. Peace.